Hey, welcome to Hooked on Crime Pod, the podcast where we talk about hooks and crooks. It is Halloween week, and this is the second part of the Jeremy Bryan Jones story. So if you haven't listened to the first part, go check that out, and then come back here for the second part, because otherwise it's not going to make a lick of sense. So let's get into the second part. Now after Jeremy had showed all these red flags to his friend that he had been staying at, he took off before the friend went to the cops. So he was in the wind, and authorities just all around the area started searching for, John Paul Chapman, which was his alias, like crazy. But they got a huge surprise when a few days later, Chapman actually called the police station and was put through to the lead investigator's cell phone. The detective did his best to keep Chapman, aka Jones, on the line so that his location could be traced, and it worked. John Paul Chapman, the guy authorities suspected for the murder and rape of Lisa Marie Nichols, was found outside the bus depot in his car. He was taken in, and a routine teletype was sent out nationwide to see if John Paul Chapman was wanted in any other states. His prints were run through the FBI fingerprint database AFIS, which identified him as John Paul Chapman instead of Jeremy Bryan Jones. For some reason, Jeremy Bryan Jones was not in the AFIS system, which he should have been, as he was a sex offender in Oklahoma, which is, kind of a big deal. So, luckily, some people at the Missouri prison that was housing the real John Paul Chapman, they flagged the teletype, and they called Mobile law enforcement and sent them a mugshot of their John Paul Chapman, the real one, and fingerprints to, match up who they had. So now the cops in Mobile wondered who the hell they had in custody, but this guy must have forgotten all of the calls in the jail are monitored. And he called his mama out in Miami, Oklahoma. And yeah, so there was a call made to the Miami police, and they said, "Oh yeah, we know Jean Beard. She has a son who flew the coop on some outstanding warrants out here and sent out his rap sheet. The rap sheet for Jeremy Bryan Jones and his prints and his mugshot." And Mobile PD checked it against who they had in their lockup. And come to find out, of course, it's Jeremy Bryan Jones, not John Paul Chapman like they thought. And then, another thing is not only had he called his mama and called her from the jail, another stupid way he had called someone was he called Vicky Freeman, his old girlfriend from Georgia, that, and he told her, he said, "Hey, I found a good job in Mobile." And she said, "Okay, baby, find a place for us to live and I'll move out there." Because this gal still had it really bad for Jeremy Bryan Jones, even though she only knew him as John Paul Chapman. And the thing that was super epically stupid about this guy is he had called Vicky on Lisa Nichols' cell phone. Yeah, he called her from Lisa's phone. But poor Vicky, she had a hard thing going when it came to who she knew as John. She had called the cops about, physical and sexual abuse he put her through, but she dropped the charges every time because he was always sorry. And she loved him, flaws and all. She was a victim of the abuse he gave her. And she would say that he was the love of her life, the love you only find once in a lifetime. And she had vowed to marry him even after he had been convicted for all he had done. She had a very stand by your man mentality, and it would go on to deny that abuse occurred to the media, but her friends and family confirmed that he had hurt her. And I have my doubts that a monster like Jones could ever love anyone, and then he only saw the lovely older woman as another mama that was more than willing to take care of him and pay for him and love him. And he took advantage of Vicky's loving heart. So, law enforcement from Alabama, Missouri, Arizona, Georgia, Oklahoma, and Kansas start combing through their unsolved cases to see if they can find anything similar to the murder of Lisa Nichols. And that's just because these are places he had been, and they had this hunch that this wasn't Jones's first rodeo. But because Jeremy Jones had started talking and he couldn't stop, he quickly confessed to the murder of 16-year-old Amanda Greenwell. But he recounted just as fast. Vicky Freeman, his girlfriend, had accidentally confirmed evidence to him having been involved when she told police the day Amanda went missing. John, as she knew him, came home covered in mud and scratches. Police found a storage locker that Jones rented and found some pretty messed up shit in there. A huge knife collection, pictures of him posing with the knives. One matched the weapon believed to have been used to murder Amanda Greenwell and Tina Mayberry. They also found photographs of women with long dark hair. The pictures were circulated nationwide and put online, and a relative of Jones called and identified herself as one of the gals in the picture, in one of the pictures, and confirmed that Jeremy had taken it. And eventually all but one woman came forward to be identified and identify themselves. And police found Mardi Gras beads, and these became evidence that tied him to the murder of a sex worker in New Orleans. And a custom ring was found that was identified by Amanda Greenwell's boyfriend, thus tying Jones to her murder even tighter. Georgia officials charged him with Amanda Greenwell's murder, and when he confessed to killing Tina Mayberry that Halloween night, he didn't realize that police had found a knife of his that was similar to the murder weapon that had been used. So, hell, he hung out at the bar that she was murdered at in the months around the time she was murdered. And she was even his type. But since there was no physical evidence to securely tie him to the case, you sell 1,500 of the same knife. It doesn't mean just because that knife type is a match that it's the same murder weapon, because they couldn't find any DNA tying her to that knife, right? So they couldn't find any physical evidence that securely tied him to this case, and so he couldn't be charged with it. But he does remain a person of interest to this day. He confessed to many murders over the next few months, but he claimed to have killed a couple in Delaware County, Oklahoma in 1996. Oklahoma authorities looked at him intensely for this because after killing the couple, the murderers set their trailer on fire. But just like Tina Mayberry, they had Jones's word but a lack of physical evidence. He claimed to have killed a man from Pitcher, Oklahoma, but the death had been ruled a suicide by overdose, so authorities refused to reopen the case. Jones said his first murder was in 1992 when he was 18. He said he stabbed a 20-year-old newlywed just days after her wedding. And she had said to friends and family that she thought she had been being watched in the time leading up to her murder. She had not been sexually assaulted, but she fought like hell. Nothing connects him to the crime, though. Just like that, they've got his word, but they don't have the physical evidence. Jones confessed to shooting a couple in Commerce, Oklahoma in 1997. They were found in a truck bed that was parked in a shed, but even though before this couple were killed, Jones had worked as a police informant and had purchased drugs from the guy that was shot. That's the only tie police could find, and that case went no further either. Let's go ahead and take a break real quick for ads, and we'll be right back. Hey guys, our spotlight artist for October and November is Tanya Corbet. She is an amigurumi artist that, when I say artist, I actually mean the things she makes look like art. They are fantastic. She has a horror cat collection that is amazing, and she has a pattern for a sandworm that is 4 feet long, and that blows my mind. So I think y'all should check her out. Go to Etsy and search for Tanflowcon Crochet, which TANFLOWCON Crochet, Ravelry.com/designers/TANYCORBEIL, and Facebook.com/FLOWCON crochet. Hope you guys have a great day and check out our crochet artist because she's awesome. Hey guys, so we have talked about how picky I am with my hair before. And if you've listened to my ads, you know that Allison Crawford had done my hair for a long time. Well, sadly, Miss Allie moved on. She is no longer cutting hair, but she did put me in touch with someone who made me feel so wonderful. And I still, like, my self-esteem is -20 on good days. But when I look in the mirror now, I still am like, ooh, I look pretty cute. And my daughter, Crime Kid, and I both cried when we got our hair done, by her. She's wonderful. Look for Cara Danielle at The Foilery, which is at 217 West Center Street in Holly Springs, North Carolina. You can go on Instagram at CARA_DANIELE_HAIR. And you can get a hold of her at 919-602-8962. And I 100 out of 10 recommend. So please give her a call today and go get your hair done, and you can feel beautiful too. Hey, if you guys are looking for a cute Etsy store to order things from, I highly recommend Designs by SMC Studio. Go to etsy.com/shop/designs by SMC Studio. And yeah, I got the cutest earrings, and shipping was fast, fantastically made product, very affordable prices. And Stephanie, who runs the shop, is a wonderful gal. She is a friend. And honestly, like, I hope she does so well and just kicks butt with her side hustle of her Etsy shop. I am super proud of her for going out and doing this. Congrats, Steph. Keep going. And seriously, guys, check out her shop. It's great. Okay, so police from Louisiana called, and they were looking they're looking to solve some unsolved murders that eventually would be found to be the work of Derek Todd Lee, the truck stop killer. He murdered sex workers, like, all over, but Jeremy had claimed to have killed a sex worker in New Orleans. He said that he had met, this was February 2004, before Lisa Marie Nichols was murdered. So Jeremy, said he had met 76-year-old Catherine Collins in the French Quarter. They went back to her place, but she got nervous and she ran. Jones said he chased her down and beat her with a tire iron and the butt of his knife, knocking out a bunch of her teeth before he stabbed her in the eye and strangled her to death. He then mutilated her genitals. The police hadn't released the horrific details of her murder other than she was stabbed and beaten to the media. He passed 6 polygraph tests about the murder of Catherine Collins because New Orleans PD had doubts since he was confessing to so many things and there was no physical evidence tying him to it. Now, New Orleans was a 7-hour drive from where he lived in Georgia, so of course police were kind of skeptical when it came, and when Jones recanted, because, of course he did. He's a freaking dumbass. This pushed them to do a little more digging, and they found a witness who ID'd not only Jones, but his vehicle in that time frame that Catherine Collins was murdered. And they found a traffic ticket that Jones's alias John Chapman had gotten. And they had those Mardi Gras beads that were found in the storage locker. So New Orleans PD charged him with the rape and murder of Catherine Collins. Jones confessed to the murder of beloved beautician Patrice Andres, saying that he stopped at her salon to ask for directions and snatched her up. He said he raped her and strangled her and dumped her in a creek that went into the Chattahoochee River. But after wasting time and resources, police didn't find any trace of Patrice where Jones claims to have put her. Jones confessed to murdering sex workers in Atlanta and Mobile. He named bridges and rivers and lakes where he dumped these women, but authorities didn't have any names and nothing to go on except that the victims had been beaten with a tire iron, and without names, they couldn't tie them to these. He also claimed to be the one who had abducted Ashley Freeman and Laura Bible and murdered Danny and Kathy Freeman, Ashley's parents. So what happened with that is on December 30th, 1999 in Welsh, Oklahoma, a fire was started in the Freeman's home, with firefighters finding the parents' bodies who had been shot to death, but Ashley and Laura were gone without a trace. In June of 2018, a man named Ronnie Busick was charged, and it's suspected that him and two buddies, Warren Welch and David Pennington, they murdered Danny and Kathy Freeman and kidnapped Ashley and Laura. Pennington and Welsh had died, but a woman who had lived with Welsh came forward and said that she had found photos of the girls who were tied up and gagged, and they looked real thin and sickly. Police believed the three guys held the girls captive while they raped and tortured them, and supposedly threw them into a pit in Pitcher, Oklahoma. But by the time this gal came forward, those photos, which would have been a fantastic piece of evidence, were long gone. Now, Jeremy's story is Jeremy said he murdered the Freemans for a friend over a drug debt, and the girls came running out after he had set the fire, and he said he kidnapped them, raped them, and murdered them, and discarded their bodies in a Kansas mine shaft. And countless man-hours were wasted exploring his claims, and, once Welch's girlfriend had eventually come forward, a bunch of ex-girlfriends and acquaintances and old friends of theirs had come forward as well, and they backed up what she said, with over a dozen people having stayed silent over the years about what they knew and what the three men had said they had done. These people had been threatened and were terrified, so they hadn't felt safe enough to say anything. Busick has he had held up the court proceedings with his failing health, and his defense lawyers asking for a full mental evaluation. But finally, in 2020, he pled guilty to the first-degree murder of Danny and Kathy Freeman, torching their home, and the abduction of the girls and their presumed murders. He was sentenced to 15 years, with 10 to be spent in lockup. Sadly, the girls' bodies have never been recovered. And in October of this year, in 2021, just a couple weeks ago, a search was conducted in the root cellar of a home that David Pennington once lived in. And he's one of the deceased suspects. And heartbreakingly, it was just another dead end. And so the search for the girls' remains continues. And I hope that one day the families can find the girls and give them a proper burial. And I hope that the families can find some sort of peace. But back to Jeremy Jones. In 2004, Jeremy Jones would have been considered a viable suspect, with what he said, although he was lying through his teeth. Jones confessed to the murders of many nameless sex workers and 13, people that he named that had unsolved cases. In April 2005, Lisa Nichols' daughters petitioned the Attorney General in Alabama to take over their mama's case because they were tired of waiting. They wanted that criminal trial to start. So the Attorney General, Troy King, he took the case, but it was viewed as a publicity grab for his election. He wanted to get reelected. Also around this time, Jones was charged with possession of a firearm as a felon to block extradition to Louisiana or Georgia for those other murder cases he was charged with before he could go to trial for the rape and murder of Lisa Nichols. So we get to Habib Yazdi. He is Jones's defense attorney, and he filed a motion to stop authorities in other states from coming to question Jones without his presence. But the motion was ignored, and Jones had the right to say what he wanted, even without his lawyer there. The drug Risperdal, I don't recall, was given to Jones while he was in jail. It's an antipsychotic, but like Alabama authorities pointed out, he confessed to murdering Lisa Nichols multiple times before he had started taking the medicine. So he had blamed this drug for making him confess. But obviously he had confessed before. So Jones said he had lied about all the confessions. That he was innocent. He wasn't involved in shit. He just wanted to get more visitation and phone time and special food. And basically he was bored and decided to talk and ruin people's time for special privileges. And Jones whined that all unsolved murders were being pinned on him and said, quote, "I ain't no Ted Bundy." But honestly, his big mouth was what led to, all of this. Not a pill and not people just saying he did all these things. Just him. And at this point, he, had recanted for everything. But then he just continued to whine and complain. But honestly, he was about to pay for what he done. In May of 2005, it saw Jeremy Jones be indicted for the rape, torture, and murder of Lisa Nichols. And at this hearing, he heard his attorney ask for a psych eval. And Jeremy started screaming, "I ain't crazy." And he started acting a fool. Habib Yazdi actually held his hand over Jones's mouth to try to just get him to shut the fuck up. That is some shit you'd see in movies. Like, he actually put his hand physically over this man's mouth to get him to shut up. So, August 2005, the prosecution receives a blow when a person who had been with Jones at the time Lisa was murdered passed away. Before his passing, he had told investigators he knew Jones had stolen a .25 caliber pistol, and he had told him to put it back. And later, it was discovered by Lisa's family that her pistol was missing, and it's very likely that Lisa Nichols had been murdered with her own pistol. But the gun was never recovered, and now the prosecution didn't have this witness to tell his story in court, but neighbors had seen his car in front of Lisa's trailer and could attest to how weird Jones had been acting around the time of the murder, and that Jeremy, he just had the gift of not shutting up, and he confessed a bunch of times, and, so all that still saved their case. In October 2005, the trial took place in the Mobile County Courthouse, despite the defense requesting the change of venue due to publicity, and the judge seemed to relish in telling Mr. Yazdi the publicity was due to his client not being able to keep his yap shut. And at this point, Jones was, he was known nationwide, so it wouldn't have made a difference. They could have moved it anywhere and somebody would have known who he was. Jeremy Bryan Jones took the stand in his own defense and blamed the deceased witness for Lisa's murder. He said that Lisa had the hots for him, and the witness was jealous. Jones was then asked why a lady like Lisa Nichols would want a drug-addicted layabout loser like himself, and Jones replied and said he thought he was very good-looking, which made the spectators in court crack up. His mama and stepdaddy came from Miami, Oklahoma, and his long-suffering girlfriend, Vicky Freeman, she had come out, and they were all there every day for the trial, with his mama telling media that her son didn't kill Lisa Nichols and that he is a good boy. Jeremy Jones was found guilty and sentenced to death on October 26, 2005, and he was taken to Holman Prison, which houses death row inmates. Now, Jones was pissed when he found out he couldn't give interviews to media personnel anymore per Alabama state law. He still continued to try and sneak around with his phone privileges, but for the most part, the shit he spewed to everyone in 2004 stopped. And he's still on death row, and he's lost 2 appeals, and he hasn't been brought to trial for the other murders he was tied to. In my opinion, it kind of seems like Georgia and Louisiana may just be content to let him rot in prison and to die for the murder of Lisa Nichols, because in a way it does the work for them. And, one day he'll be executed. And this way he won't be able to, restart the clock and have any more appeals that he could file to try and extend his time on this earth, because he does not deserve it. Now, Patrice Andres, her remains were found 8 miles from her salon, not the hour away, and dumped in a creek like Jones had claimed. And, so some of the confessions he made lost credibility. However, he's still suspected to be tied to other crimes that he confessed to, though the physical evidence is lacking. And his big mouth told lies and truths, and sadly, it leaves us with questions that can't be answered. And that is the story of Jeremy Bryan Jones. In my opinion, he sat in prison long enough. They need to get on that. Hope you guys are enjoying Halloween week. Thank you for hanging in for a 2-parter. And we'll be back with a Halloween episode tomorrow.